Well, I did say that I'd be back in October, and the irony of life, you step away and everything happens. I have been called back. Hello, Broderick. Come on, don't spoil it. Just behave. I'm trying to look good for my public that think I'm nuts and rude and thick and dangerous. Bill Broughton here. And if you like this interview I've recorded with a true bad boy, because what I'm saying is, this geezer, he managed to upset more people in the Hermetic community in one morning than I have in 3.5 years. And neither of us was trying. So I've got respect for the geezer, you know what I'm saying? So donate if you like it. And I promise, oh yeah, links down below. I promise, I swears to you, I will not use the money to go and see the most beautiful girl in the world in the Philippines for 2 weeks in the sun. And no, you donate for proper causes. Enjoy. Yeah, hello. I'm going to do Max's credentials separately and my keys here and add them to the beginning of the video because there's quite a lot here. And Max is a maverick, an eccentric, a very unusual and a weird person. And all the best people are weird, as we know, and apparently a royalist as well. So perhaps he's, the passing of the Queen recently may have rattled him a little bit. So bear that in mind. Right. There's a lot here. There's a lot. So let's do this. Maxwell Lewis Latham. In 2016, he got a BA in classical studies, specializing in Roman history. It's got Latin here in brackets. Obviously, he can speak Latin and translate Latin, and archaeology. In 2021, an MA in classical studies. His thesis discussed spirits in the ancient world in the philosophical Hermetica. Also, Apuleius de Dio Socrates, in brackets, the divine Socrates, and ancient secret societies. Very mysterious. Relevant works he has translated. So these are just the relevant works. The Corpus Hermeticum, the Asclepius Dialogue, Ludovico Lazzarelli's commentary on the former two works just mentioned, Nennius's History of the Britons, can't wait to talk about that, the prophecies of Merlin as found in the writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth and John Cornwall. He was actually the first to translate the first part of the Summa Sacri Magicae by Berengario Ganel, written in 1346, according to John Dee. His play, Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, is yet to go into print. So it would be great to see that happen. Anyone out there who can help, get on it. He is fluent in Latin and French and lived outdoors. Now this is key to our interview. He lived outdoors for 15 years as a musician, often abroad. He is also a practitioner of meditation since the age of 17. So we're going to talk about some spiritual experiences and just get into all this Hermetic stuff. Did I mention the languages? Yeah, I did mention the languages. Yeah. Latin and French. But he's learning Greek and Mandarin also. See, that's quite a mouthful, right? So, yeah, I think we'll have a lot to talk about. So, let's do it. Probably the recording.
Oh shit! Right, I have to just get everything ready because I've got a few books here as well. Oh shit! Armelianus and Tacitus. Hang on, couple more. I've just got to get up on the.
Okay, mate. Well,
oh shit! Is it recording? Fuck.
Recording. Yeah. So while you're doing that, I will say, welcome to the Broderick Wallace channel. And as you can see, obviously you've listened to the introduction. I have a very special guest called Maxwell Lewis Latham, or just Max Latham for short, and a very fascinating guy. And this interview it's not going to be quite so planned. I haven't got a list of questions or anything like that. It's going to be more free form. We are friends anyway, so it should be quite easy. And so I guess the first question is, how do you feel about getting your bottom smacked recently?
Well, like you said, Bill, big boy, bad boy, Bill Broughton, I managed to piss off more people in the Hermetic community in the space of a single day than you did in 3 years. And you don't really give two hoots, and neither do I. And, you know, some people can take a joke, other people can't. And for me, it was just a bit of fun. But yeah, let's get past it. We're all friends. And hopefully we can, you know, move on from this.
Absolutely, my friend. And you see, we've all made mistakes, and we are, most of us, engaged in a process whereby we learn to manage our reactions. And but obviously a little bit of leeway on both sides. Obviously we've all screwed up from time to time, but I think it's important that unless it's life and death, you just stay calm, you smile, it's all good. You need that confidence in the future. And let's face it, you don't get parodied unless you've made some kind of impact. So I just see it as a compliment. So thing is, when that video came, and I will put links below to those videos, when that video came up, I clicked on it, and then I clicked back. Did I press the right thing? And I sat there, and obviously it just started to dawn on me what was going on. It was like, oh my God. And well, first of all, I didn't expect to be in it, so that was a surprise towards the end. And then it was bedtime, so I lie there in bed. I just couldn't sleep. I spent an hour just thinking about the things in that video, just, you know, laughing. So it was good for me. You know, I haven't had a good belly laugh in quite a few months. So you did me a good in there, son.
Yeah, I think Sean Zen liked it as well.
Yeah, it's all good. We're all grown-ups. We're all friends.
Yeah.
And the future, I think the future is going to be amazing, because we've got this sort of loose community growing online, the Hermetic community, and we're all characters. We're all fucking weird, put it that way. And as I said in the introduction, you know, weird people are the best people. So I'm sure there's going to be many adventures ahead over the years. So looking at I did make some rough notes here. Now, there's something that has occurred to me about your good self, and that is, just like myself, you tend to put love before comfort. And what I mean by that is the things that you're into, you're so passionate about them that they seem to take precedence over
well, if I said responsibilities, I'm only laying that one on myself as well. You know, like if you're that passionate that you throw it all in there and sort of pick up the pieces later. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been that way for a very, very long time. So to give you an example, I spent 6 years being trained by the British military. And before that, I was in the Scouts. And then just at the end of my service, when I was a sergeant major, which is a warrant officer class 2, they said, right, we want you to join the army. And I had long hair and I wanted to play guitar for a living. I wanted to see the world, go traveling. I wanted to enjoy life to the full, and I certainly didn't want to work. So I spent 15 years mainly living abroad, playing the piano in restaurants and in cafes and bistros and brasseries, picking up birds, picking up languages. Really, really, just life was just a party for like 15 years. And then I got into an argument with a French geezer, lovely bloke, used to be a Buddhist, lived in Tibet for years. Then he fell in with some communists in Maoists in Paris, and that sort of smashed the spirituality out of him. And we used to have these massive, heated conversations. And he's a lovely bloke. He was anarcho-communitarist, and he was bringing people in who were all kinds of people, mainly artists, poets, musicians, people that are painters, sculptors, and he had this whole little community out in the mountains near Switzerland. And anyway, he told me, he goes, the French won the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. I said, fuck off, mate. I said, look, I don't know if you're living in the real world, but I think we handed it to you on that one. Yeah, yeah. And he goes, no, he didn't. And if you go there today, you go to La Haye farmhouse, you go to Waterloo, you wouldn't think that the British ever set foot there, because all you see is the German, that's the Prussian, and the French stuff. So he goes, where did you go to university? I said, well, School of Life. You know, I went to the fucking kindergarten and getting the shit kicked out of me. That's where I went to. And he goes, well, you wouldn't know the first thing about it then. So I went, all right. And I went back to England to get my degree in history. And I found the diary of Private Wheeler, who leaves an account of the Battle of Waterloo, but from the British side, because he had one from the French side, from a French guy, and a number of letters of officers, which also prove that we kicked their ass. And then just as I got my degree, one, I was made homeless because I didn't pay my council tax. I managed to get a council house for the first time in my life under supportive housing, but I didn't pay my tax because I'm a bit of a rebel. And they turfed me out after a couple of court cases. Never been to court in my life, but I got that. And so I ended up bumming around in Cambridge, and he died. He was in a car crash, which is a bit weird because he was the safest driver in France. He used to drive at 5 miles an hour. He'd have a cube on and go, dang, 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 dang. But, you know, he's Papi Moucho, as they call him, Baba Cool. Yeah, he's like a hippie, he had a VW camper. So he died in suspicious fucking circumstances. I mean, he did have the mafia after him, and he was a hardcore communist because he was sleeping with this daughter, and it turns out she was the daughter of like a big don, and plus he owed a lot of money to them for one reason or another from some dodgy deals he was doing in the 70s. Anyway, so I found a love of learning other than just getting one up on the French. But with regard to the magical side, Didier always used to say, he goes, votre livre, ils sont plutôt mystiques, mais your books, they're very mystical. And I said, well, yeah, because that's what I'm into. And I had like a pagan symbol on my thing, which is a Celtic destiny cross. It looks like a Christian cross, but it's actually symbolic of the 4 elements with the ether in the middle, or the Akashic principle. And we used to have these massive arguments. And anyway, so I used to do a lot of meditation and stuff, and it was mainly a life. And it was when I was at university that I really started to knuckle down. I thought, right, I'm 30 now, so I'm going to have to start knuckling down. So I started working hard. I've always had a strong work ethic. So even though I was gigging a lot, the money's good when you're a musician. If you're a musician, they treat you like a king in Belgium, in Italy, in France, not so much Spain, because they've got guitar players coming out of their ears. Germany's good. They're paying in Germany. So, but England, very difficult. You're lucky to get a half a pint of rough cider, and you're doing well if you don't get arrested or beaten up. So it's tough here. Here you're basically a beggar, but over there you're like a king. So I had to just work. Yeah, go on.
You know, it is. Yeah, it is tough over here, and it just sort of reminds me. Martin Fawkes shared something recently. Basically, he's in Japan and he's meditating underneath a waterfall every morning. And he said that the locals just kept giving him gifts. Why? Because they believed that by engaging in his practice in their vicinity, that would bestow a blessing upon everyone in the area. How different is that to, you know, life in the UK or, you know, perhaps America, most places in Europe? And I think this relates to the, you know, the busking and that kind of, it's kind of sinister. And there's been many times I've been in meditation and, you know, people shout names and all that kind of stuff. Obviously you see it as, you know, part of the training. Not that often. It's, you know, not that common. But anyway, just focusing in on some of the things that you said. Now, you mentioned this traveling as a musician, and you also mentioned being homeless. Are they together or are they two separate things?
Yeah.
Please explain that.
Yeah, well, no. Well, the thing is that when you're out there, and you'll know this yourself because you haven't lived an easy life, and even now, this is like 4 years out there in the wilderness. But it's kind of like
4 winters I've done, so it's about 3.5 years I've lived on the road.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I did
Yeah.
15, and it's like sometimes you'll be walking along in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and there's just like nothing but like kind of lynxes and wolves and occasionally the odd bear and deer and eagles and stuff. And then you come across like a waterfall and you want to meditate next to it, and it's so beautiful that I will be reduced to tears of joy at how wonderful creation is. And I think we've lost that. We all live in these little houses now, most of us do, and when you're out there among it all day, you'll see the sun come up. Most people are in bed still when that happens. And to see the sun set or to see the sun rise and just appreciate the glory of Mother Nature, or Hertha, as Tacitus calls her, is a really spiritual experience, and it brings you a lot closer. And I think that's the reason why I was able to go out of body a lot when I was younger, is because I forced myself into that situation, and it makes you attuned to nature. But just before we move on from that, something you said, Martin Folks, who's, as I said before, like Superman, you know, I've got great respect for the guy. There's something Virgil said, not Virgil Publius Virgilius Macro, the famous author, but he calls himself Virgil. He's Stephen someone, and he's written a book, The Spirit of Magic, which I edited before they booted me out as an editor recently at Falcon. And he says that the first rule as hermeticists is kindness is the first lesson we learn, and it's the last one we master, which is why in my copy of the Corpus Hermeticum, I open the book with, what wisdom can you find that is greater than kindness? And that's for Didier, my friend in France. Didier Demain.
Oh, yeah. I have actually, when did that book come out? Was it around about 2020 or something? Yeah, I did purchase that. I do actually have a video of me reading one of the chapters. I don't know if you ever come across it.
Wow.
It's actually,
well, thanks, man.
It goes back a long way. And yeah, I really enjoyed that book. And obviously it's a very different translation to the what we might think of as the, you know, the standard one. But there are gems there. It is, if you put the time in, it's very complex. You know, you have to be fully engaged in every sentence. You know, you can't just breeze through it. So yeah,
when
I
you're
really did.
translating it, it's really difficult. The only thing I've ever translated that is more difficult than that was a dream diary by a guy called Aelius Aristides. And that's really weird because you've got talking bricks and things, you know, really abstract. But philosophy, I would say, is the most difficult to translate, because one sentence, you'll sit and meditate upon that for a whole day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So how bad did it get, this homelessness? Because I remember you telling me at some point, and I've actually used this quote because I've encountered the same thing. I was so cold, I thought I might die in the night.
Well, when you're in the mountains, yeah, once it gets below -10, you can't tell the difference. I've been in 2 meters full of snow, yeah, and you'll be walking along and you'll fall through, and then you're like, where am I? And that's when the meditation training comes in, because you've got to calm yourself, because you know you've only got a certain amount of time to dig out. And the way to get out of that is to spit. That's from the locals. So if you spit, you can tell which way is up, because that's the way you dig when you're in a snowdrift. Yeah. And so the worst night I had, I was out on the lash with my mates. We'd done a gig, and I was with this girl who I knew, and my mate was with her, and they were sort of together. And he's the drummer in my band, mental band called On the Flex. We never practiced, which is why we're called On the Flex, because we just make it up. And he's such a good musician, it wouldn't even matter. But anyway, he'd split up with her. I was at a loose end. I didn't have nowhere to go. I just remember crawling along, and I ended up in some god awful abandoned sort of place, and there was no heating, and it was so cold. I thought, right, and I would just keep myself awake at night and keep moving. And you have to do that, because when it gets to that really deep temperature, if you don't sort of, you keep yourself moving, and then you sleep during the day when the sun's on you, if you can, if you don't have to do something like go and source food, like do a gig, maybe do some busking, get some. I never did anything nefarious. A lot of the mates I used to hang out with, they'd be eating out in bins, or they'd be stealing or whatever. Never do that, never. And some of the do as you likeies, as I call them, some of the do as you likeies, they say, oh, if you're homeless, you can do anything you want. But I say, no, that's when you've got to be at your most disciplined, and you'll know yourself. You work for a living. You work bloody hard, and it can't be easy, especially in the winter, dealing with water the whole time. It's probably freezing half the time.
It is one of the ironies, actually, I'll be honest. The damp is worse than the cold. I'll be honest, it hasn't been fun. And there is a strange blessing here, sort of honing in on this idea of blessings in faults. You see, I wouldn't have chosen it, but it is the perfect training. And, obviously the, ups and downs, no pun intended with the, the ladder and that. But, there have been times where I'll be perfectly honest. There've been times where I'm wondering, how much longer am I going to survive? Can I? And you when you hit that moment, something inside this primal survival instinct, a little bit of anger as well, a little bit of ego, and this is going to sound perhaps silly, but it's only true. A kind of a feeding in from outside, a kind of trying to think of the right word, a kind of rapture, if you like. You're bound up in your spiritual mission. You think about the dreams that you've had. Oh, I dreamt about this. I'm pretty sure I've got a rough idea that, the expression following the true will comes into this as well. But also remembering that whatever you're going through, there's always someone going through worse, and people have survived, through utter hell on this earth. And, I might not have a home, but I've got a van, I've got a job. Things are not easy in the UK financially. And I will say, for all the snobbery that I've encountered, I've also had this, put it this way, when you're not walking around in a suit and tie, you find these little gems here and there. It might be a girl who works in the bakery, or one of my customers, a guy called Ian, who, whenever I need to go to London, he lets me park my van on his drive. You make these friends, these special people, these people that see through the standard appearances, the standard sign of success, if you like. And you meet some diamonds, and they make
with you more.
I guess you might say that whatever you need tends to manifest if, and only if, you keep your shit together and remember that kindness, because it does have its emanation. Yeah.
There's a really nice piece of poetry saying about the rapture, and it says, there's rapture on a lonely shore. And I remember as a boy, I used to go running every morning because I'm a twin. My twin brother's taller than me, and he's like a shoe size bigger than me, and he's stronger than me. And I always wanted to be better than him. So I get up at 6 and I go running. And I used to grow up by the beach in a lovely area. It's a bit like cross between Lord of the Rings and the Darling Buds of May. I mean, you still got the shit beaten out of you at school, but in a posh accent. Yeah. And so anyway, I'd go running, and there would be a mystical energy. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you're doing your meditation practice, that there is more energy around, that when there's sometimes mist that comes in and you go running by the sea, and it's just, and I've always had that, and it's never left me. And it's always when you've been out in nature. And something else you said really struck a chord, is that when you're homeless, you probably meet more people in one day than most people will meet in a week, even if they work in a shop.
Definitely. And I tell you what, this very stereotypical idea of the fact that we are cut off from nature, when you are homeless, you are not cut off from nature. Nature is everything. The seasons have a big impact in your life. I mean, it's spring now, it's, you know, summer's on its way. Things are going to get a lot easier, and you have to work and plant the seeds in order to survive through the winter. So that's very archaic. But I mean, sat right here, right now, without even looking, I can tell you that roughly up there, very likely, is Ursa Major. Back there, you know, is Orion. I've got a rough idea, you know, where the moon would be. And this is through observation over the last, you know, 3.5 years or so, and necessity at times. The sky is as much a part of my existence as the ground. And I think when you're shut up in a, you know, in a little box, and we're not slating people for this. I mean, I wouldn't mind returning to some kind of, you know, I need to normality at some point. Although I will say, I think once you live like this, it kind of scars you in a way. Not in some ways, perhaps negatively, but in some ways, perhaps positively. It's a bit like the you know, the Greystoke movie or Tarzan or something. You know,
Wow, yeah, yeah.
got that weirdness in you. I mean, I can imagine if I had a lovely big house. I can imagine. Say, I don't. I mean, I don't do the lottery, but say I won the lottery and, you know, had millions or something. I'd keep my van at the bottom of the garden, keep it exactly as it is now. And I think, you know, if I had a partner or whatever, they'd be, where's William gone? And I'd just be meditating in my van in the cold. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
part of me that just can't let go. I've sort of become that now, if you know what I mean.
Can I say, can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, there's something I noticed, and I was homeless in a long time ago. And when you're like that, I mean, I was never as good as astronomy at you. So even though I know where the Big Dipper is and I can tell you what the North Star is, and it's only recently, since reading people like Eratosthenes and Hyginus and Aratus, that I'm starting to learn the myths of the sea. And there's even a book called Homer's Secret Iliad, written by an astronomer, and it deciphers the Iliad as a code. So when you memorize the poem, it will tell you where the stars are so that you can navigate at sea when you've lost sight of land, which is really important in the ancient world. But back to homelessness. Two skills I picked up. One, I could tell the time without even having a wristwatch. And this is before the days of mobile phones. And it ain't like France or Italy, where you've got loads of pharmacies telling you the time everywhere. We haven't got that in Britain. Half the clocks that are around here are broken anyway. And so I could tell you the time within a minute from being homeless, because it's critical that you put your tent up before that sun goes down. You're a rubber. I'm a leather. You're a rubber tramp. You've got a rubber vehicle because rubber's the wheels. I'm a leather tramp. So I have a 85-liter Bergen with water purification tablets in. I'd have a first aid kit. I'd have a tent. I'd have a roll mat. All the other hobos, they used to call me the commander because they just come out of the army cadets, right? And then the other one I got was from Manly Palmer Hall's great late Freemason and esotericist. And he said that in America in the 1930s, you could get a Native American, they call them First Nations now, and they could tell you the sound of a man's pocket watch ticking in his pocket from 30 yards away. they would go down and listen to the ground. And now we've got the smog, we've got factories, and we've got this sort of post-industrial world that everybody lives in, and they've lost that sacred connection, and it is sacred to nature, which is exclusive, I think, pretty much to hermeticists and people that are on that path, people part of the New Age movement, people that like to enjoy nature and the heavens and really appreciate it in a genuinely spiritual and genuine gratitude to being in nature.
Absolutely. There are two things that occur to me. The first one is it's not that hard to tell what the time is by looking at the sun. You get used to this. You understand, where it is in the sky. Up there, high in the south. Roughly 12 o'clock as it starts, dipping towards the the west. It might be about 4 o'clock or so. So that scene from Crocodile Dundee is not that impressive, once you get the hang of it. But yeah, imagine you're living in a van and you park different places. You're on your window cleaning round, and you're training yourself through meditation over many years to perceive extremely subtle and unseen forces. So you park in a different place every night, or you might spend a couple of nights here and move on, as I do. So when you get into bed, you're in the same container, but everything outside the container is different. So what happens is, after a while, you start becoming sensitive to the unseen outside of the container. And I'm telling you now, anyone goes near my van, whether I'm asleep or, obviously whether I'm awake, if I'm asleep, I will know. It's an extreme sensitivity created by threat, basically, over a long period of time. But also, I think there's a parallel there between being in the van and not knowing what's outside, and being in your head, with the eyes closed. I'm sure that's, that makes some kind of sense. And, I want to say something on the whole hermetic thing online. And it's a very difficult, situation, because in all honesty, secrecy is a big deal, really. And I do feel, I'm not worried about offending anyone, because everyone knows I'm, easygoing and that, and you can say what you like about me. But I do think that people are talking up a little bit too much in terms of exactly what they can do. You need to keep a mystery there, So say, for instance, you have your diary. Obviously, I belong to Seshen, and I also belong to the Companions of Set, which is an Egyptian based primarily, but witchcraft as well in general. So the idea of me spilling all the beans, it contravenes the warning in the beginning of initiation into Hermetics. That's why if you make videos, if you've got a nugget that you just want to share because you think it's important, it helps to kind of bury that a little bit, in the same way that the whole subject is protected by an outer, imagine a little bit like a peach or something. You've got that rock solid core, and then the outer surface is all nutters, and that stops people from the outside perhaps thinking too deeply about what's at the core. So I wanted to find a place to say that somewhere, so I'm choosing this place.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I agree with absolutely everything you said. And there's a number of things, and it comes up in one of my comedy videos, actually, and it's the one that Victoria had the most problem with, which is that when it comes to certain more, shall we say, esoteric rituals, that they are often given under the seal of secrecy, and that if you do not keep it absolutely hermetically sealed, that you will not only lose the ability to perform that magic, but you may have the entire spiritual world turn their back on you. Now, it might have been a funny video with some funny voices, but I was actually making a very serious point there, that this idea of secrecy is paramount. We can say a certain amount, and it's good not to exaggerate and have hyperbole. And maybe there are some people that claim to do amazing feats like levitation and whatever else, and they can't do them. Maybe they can. Maybe they're Carlos Castaneda. Who knows? But if you look at someone like Martin Folks, he's the real deal. I don't know if you've seen that video of him. There are 3 of them where he's trying to break a metal chain. Now, a cynic would say, oh, it's all fake. It's all fake, you know, it's fake news. It's controlled opposition or whatever. No, you see him fail twice. And the 3rd time he does this meditation technique and he calms his mind and he breaks an iron chain. And that's not a one-off. I've seen him go on TikTok and get the heaviest iron bar he can find and bend it like it's a lolly stick pop. Yeah. So there are some people that are capable of these feats.
I will say that the handful of people that I know that I know through experience are the real deal. One of them puts everything in books, so you've got to be asked to read the book, and most people are not going to be asked. Again, there's that technique of burying things in video, in poetry, in you might have a really long spiel, and you know the nuggets are kind of encoded and that kind of thing. It's important not to be paranoid as well. So I think paranoia might have been caused by the fact that people were burnt for this over many centuries. But if you imagine, well, we got a guy here who doesn't talk about anything intimate. And I will tell you that within Seshen, stories of experiences are not really that welcome. You see, it's kind of what you manifest through your life, you know, your life path, that will create the space for an acceptance of some of those more detailed situations. So I think, yeah, you're right. You know, you have to kind of balance things, because these art forms, you know, they are real. We know they're real. But just like with everything, I think I said before in a previous video, you know, 99% of heavy metal bands are boring. You know, 99% of anything is you know, it's all right, you know, bless them and all that, but there's not a lot of meat there. You know, there's a lot of imitation, there's a lot of posturing and this kind of thing. Originality is it's rare, and it's a very difficult thing, because when you start out in this world, you're all enthusiastic, and I think the danger is as well, especially if in the world there's not a lot else that you have. I'm talking like base level instincts here. There's not a lot else that you have that's impressive. So to hide behind this kind of partially secret, partially revealed aura of, you know, having, you know, contact and, you know, a secret mission and strange artwork and all this kind. I recognize the danger in all that. And that's why I'm going to tell you now, like, I am always partially cringing at my own content, but I feel called, especially from the point of view that it's the most natural thing in the world for me to do. So, yeah, I just kind of want to, I suppose I want people to think about this more. Like, I'm not saying I got it down properly or I'm always perfect or anything like that, but I think we need to have more discretion about how certain major experiences are transferred and shared. So,
Well,
where were we anyway?
Well, I was going to say, going back to something you just said about the instincts, even on a very basic level, before I discovered Bardon and before I'd met Tanya and was hired as the editor for Falcon, that van thing you said, you get that. I mean, I find it incredible that you can even do that from where you're at, because in a tent, it's a lot easier to do that, because if an animal comes up to the tent or even anybody creeps near it, you can hear them breaking twigs from a mile away. Sound travels 20 times faster at night That's something I learned in the army. But to be able to do that from a enclosed vehicle that's off the ground, that's like you are out of body. Moriya Yoshiba, who is the founder of the Art of Peace and the greatest martial artist of all time, a Japanese guy, even Bruce Lee gave him respect. And for a Chinaman to give a Japanese person respect was unbelievable at that time. Anyway, he used to sleep on a bed of just wood, and his students used to try and creep up on him, and he was already at the door, even though he's asleep, because he's that in tune. He's that sensitive to everything that's going around, and that comes with being in touch with the spirit world.
Yeah, there is a process of becoming more and more conscious in these art forms. I mean, well, you can choose not to if you want. You can, you know, mutter spells in the night, and you know, perhaps some of them might work or whatever. But when you're living holistically, the real deal, there is an increase in that. Even the word consciousness, it's bandied about so much, it's kind of lost its value a little bit. But the idea is to become more conscious. So there have been times, because I always go to the nth degree with everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm thinking about. So I'm like thinking, well, what is the ultimate end goal of all this? And to my mind, the ultimate end goal is to die more consciously. You know, I suppose bringing in a bit of the, I take it you're familiar with Gurdjieff.
I'm not actually. I haven't read him.
Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, I haven't. But this is another thing as well.
No, tell me. I'm interested. Who is he?
Sure. I was going to say, you've only got time in your life to master one thing or two if you're really obsessive. I mean, in terms of these art forms, you know, I mean, you can be a guitar player for a little while, and you know, you try your hand at writing and model making. But when it comes to these spiritual disciplines, you can't have 3 or 4 of them on the go. Like, they require a whole lifetime, really. And that's why I think it's not a sin to admit that you're not the expert on everything, because you really do need to become, you know, the master of one thing instead of the jack of all trades, if you like.
Bardon,
and in that
said,
you know, now my situation's my situation's slightly different. There's been a branching out because of something that was lacking for me within the Franz Bardon training, and that is my paganism and my admiration for Egypt. You see, it does say in Initiation into Hermetics that you can overlay this upon your religion, and I've always felt an extreme need to be religious. It's a very strong part of my practice. So you might say that is the religion that Initiation into Hermetics is overlaid upon. There's a little bit of Albion there, and there's a lot of Egypt. But anyway, going back to Gurdjieff, the idea is that everyone's asleep, and this sounds really arrogant, you know what I mean? But like, it is true, you know, it's true, and we see this in ourselves as well. And these screens that we're looking into all the time, you know, it's getting worse. So I think, you know, that it's maybe we're not on the, you know, the edge of a revival of these arts in a very extreme way, but there's never been a point in the human timeline where they've been required more. But that was the point I was going to make. Nothing more than that.
I couldn't agree more than that, because when I was on the road, there weren't any of these screens. It's before you had the phones that were the size of a brick that you could only have in a car, kind of thing. And so people used to, and you know yourself, you're probably about the same age as me growing up, things were a lot simpler. But when we were kids, if kids got grounded, they weren't allowed out. Now they get grounded outside, so they can't play the PlayStation or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's a different world we've got now. But just the other day, after I did my videos, and a lot of people who slated me for them, they didn't even watch them, and I got some serious blowback. And I mean, serious. And I don't just mean people talking about this stuff. It didn't stop raining and thundering outside my house. And you know, when you count the seconds, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, and it's 3 miles. It was 0. And my dog, he doesn't blink because he grew up with do as you like. So he's a former working dog. You can let a shotgun off next to him, he doesn't even blink. So there was a moment where I was a bit like, this is my time now. And I just went into meditation, and there was a strange kind of stillness, and the thunder and the lightning was all around me. And I wrote a poem about it. It's only a short poem. Would you let me read it to you?
Of course, Max. Yeah, go for it, mate. Yeah.
It's written in the iambic pentameter, and it's as a result of the blowback I got from this comedy video I made, which is dedicated to Amamaya, which is the 52nd Shemhamphorash angel, which is the angel of humor, hermetic humor. And a lot of people don't realize that. Nobody's really researched hermetic humor before. Yeah, I'll be the first person to do it.
What is
Anyway.
humor? Yeah, humor is when you make a link between two strange things that kind of work but shouldn't. That's exactly what humor is. It's the air element. It's linkage. It's Hermes.
Yeah, and the mercurial spirits are very witty. They enjoy, and even the earth zone spirits, the lunar spirits, they prefer a more absurd, off the wall humor. But this is called divine vengeance, redemption. Right, you ready? It's only short. Anger, fury of Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades rages around us all right now. Hertha groans and weeps at the thundering which strikes through her trees, cleaving them in two. Helpless crows circle the skies with nowhere to go. The storm of the furious gods lasts long. I thought we were safe, yet not. We were but in that tempestuous eye of the storm. Lightning streaks across the azure heaven, jolting me out of indolent torpor. Romulus is unafraid, a Roman, stoic. Nothing scares him, not flood nor fire. Thunder rolls and rain pours, and then there's light, peace, quiet. And all the while I had been waiting, well prepared for oblivion. This is how a Christian awaits death, patient and calm, waiting for what comes next, another world more peaceful than this one.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Very poetic. Yeah, I do enjoy poetry. I've written a lot. I know I don't look like the type of geezer who writes poetry, but I do have a lot behind me, maybe about 50 so far over the years. So I really enjoyed that.
I like to blend the pagan and the Christian elements because I'm a henotheist. So that means I believe in all religions.
Oh, okay. Oh, wonderful. So that was the storm that happened, because obviously I was trying to work through this storm, and the ladder was very dangerous. Actually, I had to call it a day eventually. So I did go through that storm as well. Actually,
well, you don't have anybody steadying your ladder. Well, I suppose you haven't got any. Well,
I got enough weight up here to sort of, it's a good.
Yeah, but still, it can go. You know, I mean, even this.
I know. I mean, put it so, I've been doing it 18 years. I have a super sensitivity towards the strength of the wind. You know, even just the tiniest movement of my ladder, I'm super sensitive towards it. Wow. So I have faith in myself. It'll be okay.
But however, where the word spiritual comes from? Latin.
No.
Spiritus, spiritualis. It means a gust of air, a gust of wind, the breath of life. Yeah, spiritus.
Yeah, now you say it. Yeah, the breath. And
we have an old 1940s bench outside, and this thing you need 2-3 big geezers to pick it up, right? And one day my mate came out to me and he goes, "What have you done to the bench?" I'm like, "I haven't done nothing to the bench." And there was a big storm the night before, and the wind had picked it up, tossed it around like it was just a matchstick, and dropped it on upside down. And me and my mate went out, housemate, we picked it up, we righted it. And the next day, it done it again. Like, the wind is so powerful, can be so powerful, that it will just pick something up that will take 3 men to lift it and just throw it around like it's just a toy in its hand.
Absolutely. Yeah, the elements, the inescapable elements, they are quite something when you're outdoors. all the
Yeah, I
time.
bet.
But no, thanks. I enjoyed that. That was. I'll
What do
tell
you
you
want
what.
to talk about next?
Yeah, we'll get that. If you've got that poem, we'll put it in the text at the bottom as well, so people can enjoy that more slowly. Right. So I think next we're going to work through your list of credentials and get you to talk about all of these things in as much detail as you like. Because there are some points I really want to stop at. It's like, oh, this history of Britain. I really want to get your view on, Britain in obviously, before the 1st century, that sort of time, before the Romans came, and obviously with the invasion and Boudica and all that kind of stuff. And there is mention of spirits here as well. So yeah, we'll go through that. So yeah, we'll have a little break, and but obviously for the audience, it shall be seamless. And okay, mate, let's switch it off and have 10 minutes.
That's cool.
Welcome back. So, because it's the Broderick Wallace channel, we cannot get through an interview without discussing Egypt. And what was that term you come up with? That sort of Egypt on the mind thing you were talking about? Seeing
Egyptomania. It comes from the Greek mania, which
right.
means madness. There are 4 types of madness, and they're written in the there's like there's another classicist I know who knows a lot more about it than me, but she pointed me towards a later text which goes into an in-depth discussion of the 4 types of mania. But it's basically cognitive bias, or mirror imaging as it's called in the Secret Intelligence Service, where you're starting to see shit that's not there, and you're like seeing Egyptian stuff where there ain't none and stuff. But that's not to say that there isn't a great deal of Egyptian wisdom in the Hermetic writings themselves, and that's what I'd like to talk about, because I'm not an Egyptian specialist, I'm a classicist, but there's a lot of crossover.
It would be good just to get your opinion, your experience, what's come through for you, Egypt wise. So
well, basically the Greeks and the Romans, not all of them, but many of them, had a very disparaging view of magic. There are a few notable exceptions. Plato is one. In the Meno, he mentions having a spell that was able to cure someone of a hangover. He also mentions meditation at the end of, I think it's the Apology. It says he went out into the snow when they were on campaign, because you had national service there, and he would just sit and meditate. In the writings of Aulus Gellius, they would say that Socrates would sit in the middle of town and he would just stare towards the sunset for like 12-15 hours. And it has been said by some scholars, more open-minded ones, that he may have been in tune with these beings because he when he was on trial for his death under the time of the 30 tyrants, one of the charges against him was having introduced new deities into the Greek pantheon. And in one book, well, actually 2 books, he mentions that the Egyptian, he mentions Hermes Trismegistus, right? So that's important. But he also mentions in another text that when he asked the Egyptian priests, they said that you Greeks are merely children. Egypt has been there from a much more ancient time, and this is corroborated archaeologically. And if you talk to Egyptian scholars, they have a much more forward-thinking view of magic, because the pyramid texts and many of the Egyptian books, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, for example, they are highly magical, and they're all to do with reincarnation and going through rituals, initiation rituals, to prepare the soul for the afterlife, the fields of Amenhotep. And you even see a picture of Thoth, which is the Egyptian Hermes, weighing the souls of the dead on papyri and things. So the Greeks were sometimes disparaging of magic, not always. And the Romans particularly even had laws that were against magic, and they would complain that Egyptian cults were being set up. There was one beautiful writing in a later writer called Plotinus, when an Egyptian priest came in and wanted to do a ritual and discover what the guardian spirit was of this particular philosopher. And they discovered, first of all, they had to find a sacred space, and the whole place was polluted and corrupted by wealth and avarice and corruption, that they could only find one place in all of Rome that was still sacred, and that was the temple of Isis. And they did this ritual, and it turned out that this guy's guardian spirit, which would normally be angelos in ancient Greek, which means messenger, or daimon, which doesn't mean demon, it actually means guiding spirit. This guy had a god as his guiding spirit, so he had a much more powerful guiding spirit.
Yeah, I've come across this before, actually. That is fascinating on all kinds of levels. I wish, like, yeah, it is so fascinating. I mean, look, the ancient world, yeah, magic, an understanding of consciousness, an understanding of the all, the mind of the all, that everything that we are, everything that exists within the imagination of the creator. And therefore, this as above, so I'm talking basic stuff here, but why not? We'll go there. As above, so below, meaning that everything that exists within the mind of God also exists within you on a smaller scale. So the creative capacity of God lies within you and can be accessed through sympathetic ritual. I mean, sometimes I sit there and I think, how has something so important just, gone by the wayside? I mean, it is staggering.
Well, there's a good answer for that. There's a very good answer for that.
Yeah.
Is that and this came up in my master's degree thesis, which is on spirits from other worlds in the Hermetic text compared to Apuleius' Judeo-Socrates, and they mention that it was kept absolutely secret, and you were not allowed to impart the teachings to other people, and the only vehicle they used to use, and you won't believe this, and this is in my thesis, and you can read it, is that irony. It was humor. And that was one of the things through the teachings of Plato, that this secret mystery knowledge could be imparted because it spoke to different people on different levels. So it would speak to the initiated, but it would also speak to people that were more profane. So, for example, the Egyptians would have and Diodorus Siculus talks about this. He said there were two kinds of languages. You had the ordinary Egyptian meaning of the words, which you may get from Champollion when he translated the Rosetta Stone, which is a very important inscription. Hermes Trismegistus is also mentioned in that. He's also mentioned on ostraca, which are fragments of pottery from around the 2nd century. But the Egyptian priests would have a normal meaning for their words, which you might get from Champollion and the Rosetta Stone, but they also had a secret meaning that was only for the initiated, that was never to be profaned. So it works on different levels, and the only vehicle that you were allowed to use to be able to impart these teachings, and I'm not saying this to prop up my own videos or whatever, but in the ancient world, the only vehicle you were allowed to use was comedy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was irony.
The funny thing is, like, I see all this occult comedy on, talking about Facebook here, like these memes and that, and they always make me cringe. I'll tell you why they make me cringe, is because it de-sanctifies the seriousness of the mindset that you should, that you should have. But at the same time, obviously, you talked earlier about, comedy, linkage. It's a very hermetic thing. If it's done intelligently in the right place, I think it's wonderful. But I don't think, I think you know what I'm saying about all these memes and that. It's like,
yeah, no, I hate those. I can't stand those.
The amount of time that you spend making a bloody meme to get like 50 likes or something, you could have done your evening practice. That's all I'm saying. Like,
Okay, well, no, but I mean, Ima Maya, for example, the 52nd Shemham Forash angel, believes that all spirits should be happy, that they should have fun. And somebody might come across a video and it doesn't profane the mysteries and it doesn't ridicule the mysteries. You'll be listening to it and you'll be laughing and you'll think it's funny. And then suddenly somebody will say something like, say, my new character, Dr. Frankenstein von Bismarck, and he will say that the medicinal doctor Galen actually had a psychic vision in a dream from the goddess Asclepius that told him, and his father had one, and he said, you must practice medicine. One time he was trying to work out what happened with the eye, writing a book about the optic nerve, and he gave up. And then a spirit came to him in his dream and he told him, no, you must finish this book. This is important because it will heal a lot of people's eyesight. So you've got to put the work in. And he did. And he did finish it. So it might seem frivolous and it might seem and ridicule and profane the mysteries, but you might get somebody who watches that video and then they go, ooh, and they listen and they think, oh, Asclepius, who's he? And they might not have heard about the Hermetic text before, and they might start to take a deeper interest. So it makes the sacred science, which is what this is, it's a sacred science and a holy art. Technicae in Latin means, in Greek means both science and art. There used to be no separation between religion and science, between art and science. They were all one. They came from philosophy. People were called natural philosophers back then. So what I'm saying is, as long as it doesn't go too far, as long as it's not profaning the mysteries or revealing anything that shouldn't be revealed to the uninitiated, it could actually be of use because the spirits themselves are happy. You look at all of the heads of the Earth Zone, the Moon Zone, the Shemham Forash, and all the other heavenly spheres. They like to have fun. They have parties, they have games, they have gatherings, they have meetings, and especially the Shemham Forash. They like witty, intelligent humor. So the memes and things that slate esotericism or ridicule it or debase it, I don't agree with that. But to just have a light-hearted conversation that somehow turns into something that is much deeper and a more mystical experience, that's a good thing, in my opinion. I'm just defending Plato.
Oh no, sure. I mean, it takes the edge off of things as well. I mean, it kind of it's it's like a cushion, you know. If you instead of sitting you down on a really rigid chair, you know, it's like just get some cushions here, and you know, would you like a drink? And sort of eases people into. And it is it is funny. I mean, like, I've often thought that the Bible as well. Well, this is. I'm sure everyone has realized this, that the Bible works on these levels as well. Like, you're not supposed to take everything in it literally. You know, it's obviously it's a teaching tool. And by the way, you said you're a Christian in the past, didn't you, before to me?
Yeah, a Christian henotheist.
Yeah.
A henotheist means someone that believes in the one. So I would believe in God. For me, it's Jesus Christ. For someone else, it might be Allah. Someone else, it might be Moses. Someone else could be a Taoist. Someone else could be a Wiccan. Someone could even be of any religion in the entire world. They could be Buddhist. But a henotheist believes in a hierarchy of angels. And a guy called Dionysius the Areopagite wrote about this. So did Thomas Aquinas. And they talk about thrones, powers, dominions, angels, archangels, and these come up in the Shemham Foresh especially. And there is a kind of spiritual hierarchy in the upper realms. So I don't just believe in God, although I do believe in God. I believe in a big, huge cosmic order of subordinate spirits. I believe in all of them, every single one. And there was one guy who put it best. He said, for a Christian, I see every religion in the world, whether it's paganism, whether it's Christianity, whether it's whatever, as part of a magnificently, perfectly cut diamond. And each of the religions are a face of that diamond. And for me, at the center is Christ.
Oh, that's a lovely image. Do you think that Christ actually, just as an opinion, you know, faith or whatever, do you think that he actually walked the earth as a real manifested human being?
This is a very difficult question to answer, but it is found in the writings of Eusebius, who wrote a book called The History of the Ecclesiastical Church, that he actually uses the word symbolon in ancient Greek, which means it should be a symbolic teaching, and it works on very many levels. The Bible is not a comical book at all, and it is very misunderstood. People have used it throughout the course of time to gain political control, to gain materialism, when the essential teaching is one of peace, that thou should not kill, that thou should love thy neighbor and the love thy Lord God with all thy heart and soul. And it also is very, very deep. It's mentioned in magical grimoires. For example, the Greater Key of Solomon has a lot of invocations using the Psalms. The Shemham Foresh angel are easily summoned when you speak Latin. And also, there's a thing called the Kabbalah. Now, I'm not talking about the Jewish Kabbalah or the Christian Kabbalah or the Islamic Kabbalah. They are all one. They are all part of the same Kabbalah. And what the Kabbalah is, and Hebraic scholars know a lot more about this than me, and I'm only just starting to learn Hebrew myself, is that it is a cipher. It has a hidden code beneath the surface. Like Manly Palmer Hall said, as soon as you take the Holy Bible, much of which was written in verse of the Old Testament at one time, as soon as you take it out of its original context, its original language, you blight it within its early frost. So there is a mathematical key in the Kabbalah, which if you have read the Kabbalah and you understand Hebrew, you count the letters according to this mathematical formula, and it will give you the key to the true meaning of the Bible, which very few people understand. Bardon talks about it in The True Key to the Kabbalah. And also, it's something that is very misunderstood. It's just a very difficult book to read, and you would have to study for years and years and years and meditate. Sometimes you even see images in the original Hebrew. So there'll be a figure of a man. So as soon as you translate that into Greek or Latin or even English, you lose the imagery. There are sacred symbols in there.
You know what? That is just how complicated everything is. And as I said before, you can only really pick one or two things at the most, you know, to really get in there and master these through a lifetime. Just this absolute complexity, all those years, all the texts that are missing, you know, the Library of Alexandria and all those texts that were burned in Mesoamerica as well, you know, the conquistadors. You think how much has been lost. I mean, if we had all that back, just think how much more complicated it would be. Like, you know, you learn about the history of a country or a new religion. You get a new angle on everything that you're doing. And I think this is actually part of the appeal of initiation into Hermetics, because it kind of just brings you down to sitting, you know, perhaps in the dark, closing the eyes and, you know, examining the mind and learning how to perceive that inner realm, if you like. It's quite a beautiful thing. I definitely know that a lot of confusion has been stripped from me, you know, through going through engaging in meditation, actually.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there, Broderick, because in Nenad Georgievic Telemann, MA, in his works, he even speaks about this, that there are certain journals and copies of books, even in the Akashic records, there are copies of books that have long since been lost to the human world, that the Shemham Forash and the Earth Zone spirits and the lunar zone spirits, the Saturnian spirits, the Venusian spirits, the Martian spirits, and even the solar spirits, they've kept the records, and they keep the records, and they even keep records of books that we're in the process of writing. And these are living books that then change, and they will only be perfectly formed when we finish and publish them. So they keep records of everything. But because mankind has been so stupid in the past and has abused its knowledge, that was one of the reasons that Atlantis apparently was a scientific experiment that went wrong, because men started to use it for their own gains. So it's only really through Hermetics, specifically, I believe, Bardon's system, but there are other systems. There's Golden Dawn, there's AAA, and I even spoke to a hermeticist recently who was a lovely guy from California, and he said back in the 90s, if you talked about hermetics, it was like, and he used to be a hermeticist, and he's only recently come back, and now he can't believe that people are actually talking about this, because you never used to be able to. It used to be kept absolutely wide tight.
Absolutely. You know, this brings to mind the idea of the Akashic records, which is a very new age term. Did that come from Blavatsky? I'm not sure. I don't know if you know.
It's something that actually really exists, and it goes back to ancient Vedic texts. So that's something that is beyond my knowledge as a scholar. I read them in translation because I'm not a scholar of Sanskrit, Latin, ancient Greek, and a number of other modern languages are my speciality, specifically French. A lot of occult books are written in French. Albertus Magnus. There's Jean Baudin. He was the first come up with the term witch. He was the first person to use the term witch and to first establish a system, if system can be loosely tied to the Middle Ages of witchcraft and demonology.
Do you know, I've just got three things come into my mind there that I want to share. One of them is this notion that in the old days, you know, speaking very loosely, the way I do, back in the old days, we used to believe in the spirit world, like, you know, in general, that you had a soul, a double. You might stare into the Bible for hours, or, you know, if you could read, who knows, yeah, or at least contemplate or meditate upon a statue or whatever. And these days, we have an artificial soul. It's our online presence, if you like. We stare into the tablet of the phone, and the idea is that we become someone online. I've talked about this before on my channel. It's a kind of like a pseudo spirit world or a faux soul. And sometimes I have caught myself thinking, becoming concerned about what's left behind. Like, is how much of this carries on in the world after I'm gone? It's a very human concern. And I'm going to share an experience here because I believe it's extremely appropriate. I remember waking from a dream just a few weeks ago where I had this absolute certainty that, like, this is not the main event. What we pass into upon death, this relates to going through these processes of training to become more conscious, more solid upon death. The realm that we embark into upon death, that is the actual arena. And everything, I'm not the first person to say this, of course. It's
in the Hermetic writings.
Yeah, but everything that you are, everything that you think, everyone that you've reacted with, like you said, every book, it's all there. You imagine that you're on your deathbed and you struggled with all these things. You tried to make a name for yourself, and even in very noble ways. You've tried to be a good person, and just this idea of the world, almost as if like how the water erodes the coasts, and everything eventually gets buried and everything rusts, and the only things that are left for thousands of years are these mysterious stones that we barely understand. The idea of thousands of years time that almost everything is gone. If the myth of Atlantis is true in some way, which I believe it probably was, the idea that all exists somewhere within the mind of the all, I think that's to be honest, that was a very comforting.
Believe it or not, it goes back to ancient Egypt.
Talk Egypt.
Okay, well, the pillars of Hermes, where the Hermetic writings were first kept, they weren't written in Greek. In book 16 of the Corpus Hermeticum, there is a letter to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh replies and says, do not translate these into ancient Greek. You must keep them in the Egyptian hieroglyphs because our words have power. There weren't even any vowels in the Egyptian alphabet because they were considered so sacred that you couldn't even utter the ineffable names of the gods. They would invoke angels. Now, these pillars, the Egyptian priests, they knew that the flood was coming, and that these writings would have to be preserved. So they carved them upon pillars, and these were spherical. They calls them cylinders, and they buried them deep beneath the earth, and they knew everybody was going to die. They knew it. But they also knew what was going to happen in the future because they were magicians and they were very good diviners. So they knew how to survive the flood and how to resuscitate these texts, which they then would go down and survive. So it's only thanks to the ancient Egyptians that we have got a sort of second-hand tradition that has come from ancient Egypt. Eventually, there was a flood, and there's a very strange type of soil at the base of the Sphinx, which geologists still can't work out why the kind of soil is as it is. So there is definite evidence for a flood, and there's an abundance of literary evidence, not just from the classical world, but in parallel texts in Mesopotamia and all sorts of places. And anyway, it eventually went through to Ptolemaic Egypt, Alexander the Great. You had Alexandria, which is a very enlightened period. You had Christians and pagans living together, a bit like the Abbasid Caliphate in the 10th, 11th century in Spain, where you had Jews and Christians and Muslims all sharing magical texts together and things like that. And so it eventually got handed down and handed down and handed down until it got to Constantinopolis, which was then taken over in 1453 by the Moors, and somebody smuggled the texts out, a guy called Leonardo da Pistoria, into a monastery in Macedonia, where it was then brought to Italy, where the Medici family were acquiring a huge amount of manuscripts, and that was when it was first translated into Latin. And Latin was the language of the intelligentsia, and still is in a certain way. That was the first time that these texts really became widely accessible. So people like Isaac Casaubon, who is what most of the scholarly world cling to, and they say, this can't be ancient. It's not ancient Egyptian because of the style of Greek that it was written in. And so he'll look at parallels from the 1st, 2nd century AD and see other authors and the phrases they use. Say, look, it's the same. But actually, no, read the remaining Hermetic texts. And it says quite clearly, categorically, that they were written in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Even Iamblichus mentions this. Going back to the soul and what happens after the death, there is an Egyptian text that I'd like to read to you that I've translated from Stobaeus's Hermetic Fragments. And when we say fragments, we mean books that thick on ancient Egypt. Yeah, so they're not really a collection of fragments. They're like huge, but it talks about what happens in the Egyptian manner after death. So first of all, it talks about how souls are born, and it's Isis talking to Horus. So they talk about what happens to you when you're gone, and I'm just going to try and find it here. I mean, there's a lot here. It talks right. Yeah. Right. So here we go. Well, yeah, because my work's on spirits, so my work's on angels and the zodiac and planetary powers and things. So it might not even be in this document, but let's have a look.
That's okay, mate. Well, take your time. As you were talking there, it brought to mind the Edfu texts in Egypt. I believe there's an Atlantean story there. You know what? Egypt is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, look, I'm cleaning windows all day. I have to do my practice. I've got other things to do. There's only so much time I can put into learning more about Egypt. In my 20s, I guess I spent about 10 years where most of my reading would have been on Egypt. And even putting in that much time, it amazes me, like there's always new things to discover. So, for instance, you know, my friendship with Mog Morgan, joining the Companions of Set. This idea of the struggle in the ancient land between the followers of Horus and the Setians, you can see like a historical battle taking place there where obviously the victor was Horus. And there's a place, I believe, called Nakada. It's like an archaeological site. I think it's, actually, I won't say anything I'm not sure of. There's this place called Nakada, which would have been a temple dedicated to Set. And Set is the father of Hermes, and there's a lot of parallels there. And when you have to read Mogg's books to really get this, but you start seeing the parallels between Thoth and Set, and kind of the traditions that have kind of smuggled their way in through the Setian line, and the new things that have developed, like mummification, for instance. The Setians would practice dismemberment and this kind of thing. So there's this whole other world that opens up when you're looking at ancient Egypt, when you start pursuing the traces of Setianism.
Well, the best texts from the classical world, and these are from outsiders, so you'd really have to be a dedicated Egyptologist and study Egyptian hieroglyphs to fully understand it. But it's certainly from the classical world, you're looking at Plutarch's On Isis and Osiris, which goes into heavy detail about the Egyptian mysteries. Herodotus' book 2 especially, but elsewhere in Herodotus' books work, but he can be a bit gullible at times, and he sometimes believes stuff that isn't actually there. But this bit, I found it, and it's Isis talking to Horus and teaching Horus about what's going to happen to him, how souls are born, and what will happen to him when he dies. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, please. The stage.
This is my translation, right? And so I'll just read a small section. So it goes, so Horus, my son, when angels and demons, that's angeloi kai daimonia, fetch a soul in the lower world, they become warlike, and this is their way to see that the right one is taken. The soul that has forgotten its proper behavior, or rather only comes until it competes for them, is he who belongs to him superimposed. These companions are on different roads than this same one he is on. When they are peaceful, so the soul also returns to its proper peaceful course. If the soul like to repay justice, then the soul also does the duty of the judge in the afterlife. If the soul was a musician, then the soul also sings in the afterlife. If the soul is a lover of truth, then the soul also devotes itself to philosophy. Indeed, it is almost necessary that these souls are appropriate to the way of their being, to see them what they do love doing on earth. Because if they fell into humanity, the souls have forgotten their proper nature, and even more so for the souls which are further away. And in revenge, the souls remind themselves of the way of being of those things which had been locked away secret. So it's saying, if you're a window cleaner in life, or you work in Domino's, like me, right, then you're going to end up working in Domino's for the rest of your life. So you better find another job. And that's what I've been trying to do. So that's why I'm going into Hermetics and trying to make my life about Hermetics and anything to do with it, so that when I get, but it's what you'll really love doing. It's what you really love doing. So you probably won't be a window cleaner. You'll probably be an author, I would have thought. And then you'll be doing meditation practice. If you, window cleaning is like your side job or whatever. Your real life is you as a hermeticist, right? So in the afterlife, you will be a hermeticist who doesn't mind doing a bit of hard graft, doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. One of the heads of the Earth Zone is a very powerful head, more powerful than even the most noble heads, is a guy who's a cleaner. And he says, if there's something that you need doing, and he'll quite happily mop it up for you. And he's much more powerful than these knobby types that just say, oh, go do this, do that, because he doesn't mind doing a bit of hard graft, just like you or I.
Yeah, there's nobility in that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hesiod even says it is shame to not work. Shame for to not work. But if you work, that's honorable.
You have to, in a way. Someone said to me recently, a friend, I've just had the whole day off. Why didn't I spend the whole day meditating? Like, too much freedom in a way is kind of limiting. Like, you do a day's work, you're looking forward to the evening. It's like, right, I need to make the most out of these 2 or 3 hours, or everything. everything is about balance, really. I mean, I will say this general subject I never get bored of, although sometimes when I wander onto Facebook and I include my own content on this, sometimes I do. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, you know. But still, just give it 10 minutes, you know, have a cup of tea, whatever, just go down the shops. You're back on again. Everything. I mean, we need hard work. We need, you have to accept, especially in this kind of, the need to become a celebrity or someone online, as we talked about before. This is unrealistic. And when you start to realize that everything that you do matters, and that when you pass on, hopefully consciously, you will pass on into new levels and new responsibilities, it kind of makes sense out of the trial in a way. Or I do struggle with this slightly. I do have a kind of Gnostic element to my spirituality, if you like. I am frustrated by the unfairness, you know.
But you're quite right to say this. Absolutely, Will, because like basically I've got a mate of mine and he's in a band called Boiler Monty and he plays ska. He's ska, right? But he was working grafting, working on a farm, and they were bringing in the harvest. And one day they're just getting to the end of the day, and these guys, they work hard. You know, they get up at the crack of dawn and they don't stop working until the sun's coming down. And as they're bringing in the harvest, the sun's coming down, and he just had this spiritual moment where he knew that this is what man should be doing. This is where he was. So even though he loves playing his trumpet in the band, and that's been his life for very long, there is nothing wrong with hard work at all. And I'd like to say something else that relates to what you just said there. Now, I used to work as an actor on film sets. Like, there's been a big Hollywood movie, and I had a speaking part. I was the only person in my town that got a speaking part because their talent spotted me, right? And at that time, I was on the up and up. I had a big YouTube channel. I had 46,000 hits on one of my videos in the first 24 hours. That was Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed. It was my comedy take on it called Walk on the Mild Side. And it was just after I come off the road for 15 years. So I was on the top of my game because I've been a guitar player for 15 years. So I was bang on it. Anyway, so I had quite a few hits. I had like literally hundreds of thousands of hits. I got into a copyright dispute with Google over RCA records from a comedy thing we did with my old man of an old Doc Watson song that's over 100 years old. You're in the jailhouse now, and we had these like straw hats and like fake teeth and in the jailhouse now, and we got sued by like RCA records, right? Yeah. So I just went on there and I just deleted all my videos, and they got seriously pissed off with me, right? And I backed them up and I intended to upload them again, but my hard drive died. And ever since then now, I watch my hits go down. So like even these comedy ones, it'll go up to 191, then it'll go down. How can they go down? And it's the secret intelligence services, it's Google, big tech. They control who's popular and who's not popular. So us looking at the hits and going, oh, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. Actually, they control who becomes famous and who becomes not famous. And if you piss them off, you will never become famous and you will always be a slave. I say, fuck them, the lot of them.
I will echo your fuck them, definitely. I mean, you know, the world is going this way. I mean, if you're, I mean, like our Hermetic community, it's under the radar, you know, for the most part. But obviously this is going on. It's definitely going on. Google is controlling. I mean, you know, I just I'm doing a lot of fasting recently, right? And if I sit here in the van,
me too.
Yeah, hopefully you can see it in my my thinner festerism.
No, but it's a spiritual practice as well.
Of course, because it's you can't meditate full, and sooner or later it dawns on you that your body needs to be a reflection of your practice. But it's okay. We're all human. No judging anyone. I've been through hard times. We're all going through hard times. But sooner or later, it does dawn on you that you need to make changes in every area of your life. But anyway, we won't get too much into that. If I sit here in the van and I say, Jesus Christ, I'm starving, there'll be, what's that? Just Eat will come up next time I go. You know what I mean? It's like everything, you know, like these phones, they're listening to us make love. They're listening to us, well, just fill in the blanks, right? How did we let this happen? And the answer is bread and circuses, right? Entertainment. Although bread is thinner on the ground these days. So
that comes from the writings of Cassius Dio.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, take it away.
Juvenal. Yeah. I mean, that's a very ancient concept. I'd rather go back onto the ancient Britons. Could we talk about that for a while?
Definitely. I tell you what, we'll take a little break and then
okay,
we'll
wicked. I shouldn't have said the F word, and I apologize about that, by the way. I'm on your show.
It's the Broderick Wallace channel. You can be yourself, you can swear. And you know what? I hope people, I do hope people appreciate that I'm not chucking up interviews every week, you know, just trying to fill in the gaps. And this is being a slave to the machine as well. Like, I'll upload it on Tuesday at the same time every week. Make sure you interview everyone. Like, I'm only talking to people if the stars align, if it's correct, if there really is something to say.
And just before we clock off, can I just say one thing? Because I maybe came across as a bit deranged or paranoid. I have studied computer science. When I was a kid, I wanted to write computer games, right? That's what I wanted to do. Then I found my love of music, and I just ended up becoming a musician. But when I was studying computer science at Weymouth College, we were understanding random numbers, and there's no such thing as a random number on a computer. There have been several advances recently, and only in the past year or so, where I was trying to get sort of random numbers, but it's like one of those wheels you get as a kid that you can type out people's names, that you turn the wheel round and you get, so they're pseudo random numbers. And if you go low enough into what's called machine code, which is a first generation programming language, or assembly, which is a second generation programming language that uses 3-letter acronyms or abbreviations, they can drop down beneath the operating system and change the outcome of any number. So it might not even be Google's fault. It probably is Google's fault because they own YouTube. But what I'm saying is crypto, the Tor browsers, it's all owned by the secret intelligence services, the Five Eyes. They were the ones that made it, and they can change any number they want. So they can change someone who goes from 460,000 hits, like I had, and they can take them down to 2. Even though people watching it 5 minutes ago could see you have 46,000 hits. But if you piss these people off, they will just destroy your reputation and you will never become anybody. You will be a window cleaner for the rest of your life if there's anything they can do about it. And so it's not paranoia, it's a knowledge of computer science that is the reason I know this.
Yeah, I'm listening. And
anyway, I read a lot about them.
Yeah, just before we take a little break here, you know, I grew up born 77, you know, a kid.
Hey, we're the same. Well, I'm 78. I'm 78.
Okay, yeah, so you know that world then, right? Star Wars and all that, and Transformers, and all of the amazing movies, you know, Rambo and Predator and everything, yeah. And entertainment was, I guess, it's the high point of Western civilization in a way. It's when the, you know, Americana was, you know, chucking out some interesting, you know, cultural stuff, if you like. But there's a notion of growing older in a world that you weren't prepared for. You know, like, you know, this is going to sound terribly arrogant, but I can read, I can write. Why is that? Because didn't have that distraction of the phone when I was in my teens.
I bet you got good handwriting. I bet you draw well.
When I put the effort in, I can, you just slant everything just slightly over to the right and it looks beautiful. You know, that thing.
I try and keep mine straight. I try, but I can't. I end up slighting to the right. Yeah.
But yeah, just growing up in a world.
Kids can't write nowadays. You try and get a kid to write, they can't write a letter. I mean, I was speaking to a lady in a bookshop in Cambridge. She said she tried to, they didn't know where to write the address. They could, because it's all on the phone. One
Yeah,
kid couldn't tell you how much change they've got in their hand because they're used to going boop with the phone.
yeah, and it is something you need to, like. I don't want to have to be. I mean, I love the benefits. I mean, talking about guitar playing, I made a lot of music, and whatever you think, whatever anyone think, I made it. It's there. It's on YouTube, and I was able to have a home recording studio. Well, a home recording studio, just PC, a few little electronic boxes and things. I could make professional sounding music after a couple of years once I'd learned how to use it.
Yeah, four-track mix.
Yeah, you see all these benefits come in. You know, it's, but the price is, you know, I think we're going to be required to, you know, our old people struggle, don't they, a little bit with the modern world, internet and all that. I think the same thing is waiting for us, which is another reason to meditate, basically, because it's going to get hard. So, right, I'll whack it off now and go and take a leak, and then we'll come back. Talk about Boudica.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, here we are again. And I'm going to set things up a little bit here. And you see, part of my message, as small as it is, you know, through experience, this love of ancient Britain is palpable. A place where I've spent a lot of time in the countryside is the Aylesford Downs. And I understand that somewhere in that area, Snodland, Aylesford, these two armies clashed, which decided the fate of ancient Britain. Basically, I don't know if the word Celtic is appropriate, but obviously because it's the corners, if you like, of the UK that contain what we think of as Celticness. But within England, this is where the greatest loss was suffered, which ties in with Tolkien trying to reclaim an English mythology, if you like. So that sense of loss is palpable in the landscape where the battle actually took place. So, like a lot of people do, like a lot of people do, I did my kind of layman's, you know, fascination with ancient Britain, and you realise that there's not a lot there. There's not a lot that you can find on the Druids. I mean, it's admirable. It's fine that you do your best and, you know, make a few things up, look at other cultures and all that kind of stuff. This is where the fascination with ancient Egypt really becomes practical, because if you go to the place, obviously the famous quote 9/10 of magic, and you extract what you can and then you bring that into the English landscape, in my own humble way, I believe it's a method of communication. So I guess what I'm doing by setting this up, I'm saying at the heart of the Egyptomania is that sense of loss. And I'm going to paint a picture of a misty isle on the edge of the world. Apparently these Roman soldiers were literally shitting their pants, thinking about the evil spirits and the legends of the ferocious painted people and all this kind of stuff. There's actually I can't remember his name right now, a policeman actually who's written a few books on this subject, and one image stuck to mind, and that is that boat. Let me get to the notes that I've made, because let's make a timeline. So Julius Caesar, 2 attempts to conquer Britain, 54 and 55 BC. So there is this image of this boat skirting around the coast, trying to find somewhere to land, and these ancient Britons appear on the cliff, and they're following the ship. I can see the mist. I can picture that. It's such a palpable image. And I understand also that these landings were troubled by storms. And I do think that there's a hint of the mysterious druids. I do sense their hand in that. So we have two attempts, 54 and 55 BC, to conquer Britain. Of course, Claudius comes in 43 AD, and that's where that battle took place in the landscape that I described earlier. And then we move forward to 60 to 6. Did I say 43 B? I meant 43 AD. Then we move forward to 60 to 61 AD with the Boudican revolt. So we're going to get onto your Boudica stuff for the moment. I understand that your qualifications, your study, centered very much on Roman Britain. If you want to paint a picture for us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, the evidence is very sparse, and if you only look at the literary sources, you're really only getting half of the picture, and that half of the picture is a very skewed picture. It's a case where the Romans used to dump on their enemies a lot. And so you have to read against the grain, and you have to compare it to, say, the Irish sources, the old Irish, because they spoke of the Druids. And you don't really get any writings until about the 4th century AD. A guy called Ausonius, who was actually from Bordeaux, would write Nora Chadwick's book, The Celts. She talks about this as a secondary source, but it's not a bad source. It goes into the etymology of languages like Welsh and other native early British languages. So it's really difficult. The other half you get is archaeology. Like, for example, you get in one of Cicero's letters, his son is posted to Britain, and he says, "Oh, there's no gold or silver in Britain, and there isn't even one lettered man among them." Now, you go into the local museum where I live, which is the county museum for the whole of Wiltshire. I'm from Dorset, by the way. That's the land of the Duch Rodriguez. This is a different tribe. You go there and you look at the old Celtic gold exhibition, and you can see the most magnificent pieces of artwork that have been excavated. So Quintus Cicero didn't really know what he was talking about, because he didn't really stay here for very long, because at those times, in the days of Julius Caesar, they really only had like little excursions to Britain. And when they did turn up, they got their asses kicked proper. Now the Romans said, "Oh yeah, we went there and we conquered them and we took tribute from them," but really they had a hard time, and we fought them back. And it was a bit like we got their asses handed to them, and they got their asses handed to them. And one of the things Caesar does say about is our chariot riders, that they were so agile that they could walk up and down a chariot, dance all across it, throw spears, go on the horses while they're going along, and he pays great tribute to them. Then you find things like the Vindolanda tablets, which talk about, "Oh, we went out on patrol and we lost like 5 men and like another 12 were wounded. And these guys, they don't even fight fairly. They get off their horses and then they start throwing spears at us." There's even one where it calls us the Brutum Cooley, which means the pesky little Brits, the wretched little Brits. Yeah, there's a Roman that was like shaken down, and he was a trader, and they basically appropriated all of his stuff. And he said, "And I'm not even a Briton," as if it was just perfectly normal to just go up to a British person and just take all their stuff, right? So they were very heavy-handed, the Romans. But when Julius Caesar came here, which is a lot earlier than most of the Vindolanda tablets, which is about 79 or so AD, a few of them a lot later than that, 3rd century, you get an account, and it's a relatively detailed account of Britain. I could show you parts of it, like so we've got here in the Gallic War at book 4, chapters sort of 13 onwards. He says, This is a translation who did this translation? Let's see, it's an early translation, but it's a good one. Oh, H.J. Edwards. I've got loads of translations here. I've got like Carolyn Hammond's. I've even done my own translation, but I haven't translated the bit with the Druids. I've only translated another later tract by a guy called Aemilianus Marcellinus, because he discussed their magical aspects, and even Pliny, who's this guy here, Gaius Plinius Secundus Major, not the younger Pliny who described his death in 79 AD. He discusses the magicians of Britain. And it's only one line, but it tells us, and it says that magic is so ubiquitous in Britain that you'd think that everybody practiced it. And it's infected. He doesn't like magicians. He's a doctor. He's a scientist. He doesn't believe in the reincarnation of the soul. But you read against the grain, and you think, crikey, there must have been quite a few people practicing magic back in Britain. And the time he was writing, Britain hadn't even been fully subjugated. There's another writer, very important writer, Publius Cornelius Tacitus, who wrote a book called The Life and Death of Gnaeus Julius Agricola, who was his adopted uncle. It's the only book that survives about ancient Britain and the ancient world. And he says, oh yeah, we went up there, we took them on, we did this battle, we did that on the Battle of the Grampian Hills, and then we took all of Scotland. Actually, you look at the archaeological evidence, they didn't get any further than 50 miles north of the Antonine Wall because they were too scared. Hadrian's Wall is fortified on both sides, so we were still attacking them. Even after they'd enslaved us, they killed most of our men. There are coins which exist, which show slaves and children and women being dragged off, taken to Rome, re-educated as Romans, and brought back here to keep us in check. But anyway, this is what Caesar says about it. It's only a short thing. He goes, throughout Gaul, there are two types of people of definite account and dignity. So it's in omnia Gallia eorum hominum qui alios sunt numero atque honore genere sunt Deo. As for the common people, they are treated almost as slaves, venturing naught of themselves, never taken into counsel. The more part of them, oppressed as they are, either by debt or by heavy weight of tribute, or by the wrongdoing of the more powerful men, commit themselves to slavery to the nobles, who have in fact the same rights over them as masters over slaves. Of the two classes above mentioned, one consists of the Druids, the other of the knights, that's the Equites. The former, the Druids, are concerned with divine worship. So he says, rebus devinis, which means like divine matters, matters of divinity. The due performance of sacrifices, they were into human sacrifice, everybody knows about that, public and private, and the interpretation of ritual questions. A great number of young men gather about them for the sake of teaching and hold the Druids in great honor. It is fact that they who decide in almost all disputes, public and private, and if any crime has been committed or murder has been done, and there is any dispute about succession or boundaries, they also decide it and determine rewards and penalties. If any person or people does not abide by the decision, they ban them from the sacrifices, which is their heaviest penalty. They are also banned or reckoned as impious and criminals. All men move out of their path of the Druids, and they shun their approach and conversation for fear that they may get some harm from their contact. And no justice is done if they seek it. No distinction falls to their share. Of all the Druids, one is chief, he who has the highest authority among them. At his death, either any other that is preeminent in position succeeds, or if there are several of equal standing, they strive for the primacy by the vote of the Druids, or sometimes even armed with force. These Druids, at a certain time of year, meet within the borders of the Carnute tribe, whose territory is reckoned as the center of all of Gaul, and they sit in a conclave at a sacred space, a consecrated spot. There they assemble from every side all that have a dispute, and they obey the decisions and judgments of the Druids. It is believed that their rule of life was discovered in Britain and transferred then to Gaul. So we taught the French. And today, Those who study the subject more accurately journey, as a rule, to Britain to learn it. So, people from anywhere in the Celtic world, could be in Spain, could be in parts of Greece, even could be northern Italy. They send their sons to Britain to be trained by the Druids. The Druids usually apart from war. They're set apart. They don't pay any tax with the rest of the people. They're excused from military service and exempt from all liabilities. Tempted by these great rewards, many young men assemble of their own free will to receive their training. Many are sent by their parents and relatives. Rumors and reports say that in the schools of the Druids, they learn by heart a great number of poems and verses and songs, and therefore some people remain there 20 years under their mystical training. And they do not think it proper to commit these utterances to writing, although in almost all other matters and in their public and private accounts, they write in ancient Greek. That's untrue. There are 0 inscriptions that survive, but it could be true because they could have written on wood and that wood perishes. I think there's 2 Greek inscriptions that survive from Britain. All the rest are in Latin, well, obviously. I believe that they have adopted the practice for 2 reasons. That they do not wish, as a rule, to become common property, so they keep it secret. Nor do those who learn the rule to rely on writing and so neglect the cultivation of memory. And in fact, it does usually happen that the assistance of writing tends to relax the diligence of the student and the action of the memory. So they'd use the ancient art of memory, mnemonics, things like that to remember stuff. Plato even mentions that in a tract called the Philebus, where Hermes Trismegistus is mentioned as Thoth. So the cardinal doctrine which they seek to teach is that the souls do not die, but after death they pass from one to another. And this belief, as the fear of death is thereby cast aside, they hold to be the greatest incentive to courage. Besides this, they have many discussions about the stars and the movement and the size of the universe and of the earth and the order of nature and the strength and powers of the immortal gods. And these they hand down their sacred lore to the young men of the Celts. So that's one source. Now we know this is true mostly because in the writings of Aemilianus Marcellinus, a much later 4th century writer, he actually discusses the Druids at length. And if you would permit me, I'd like to read you my own translation of his work. It's a lot shorter.
Please do.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
While you're finding that, see the emphasis on memory, like anyone involved in the Hermetic world, that should ring true somewhere. The emphasis on the capacity of the memory. I did mention this actually. I was interviewed on the Egyptian Magic podcast, and it was an absolute honor, a surprise, just still so surreal. I've been a big fan of that YouTube channel for years now, and I really wanted to impress that to this emphasis on them without going into detail. If you just sit and contemplate, what is it about the capacity of memory that would enhance the training? And anyway, carry on.
That's cool, man. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there is actually the ancient art of memory, which is very little studied, and it's found in the writings of Cicero. And I've gone out and I've bought the critical editions of these books, and I'm planning a book on it called The Ancient Art of Memory. There's also another tract called To Herennius, and it's there to do with oratory. And Roman oratory was big in their day. The main cursus honorum, as it's called, was to learn how to be an orator. So you have to be able to speak in the law courts and in the Senate. And so the knobby pricks that never did a day's work, sorry, the nobles, they would learn oratory and rhetoric because it was a very useful skill to spin things, much like politicians do today. Boris Johnson is a classic example. He's a spin doctor. He's an ancient orator, but he actually speaks about almost 10 different languages. You might think of him as a buffoon, but he's actually one of the greatest classicists. He's very good at Latin and very good at ancient Greek and speaks a number of other languages. But anyway, in Cicero's tract on De Oratore, book 3, he mentions the ancient art of memory as laid down by Simonides, and they had to be able to memorize very long speeches, so they would use mnemonic techniques to be able to memorize huge amounts of information, a bit like learning lines for a movie or something like that. Back to the Druids. So
Okay.
just as this is Aemilianus Marcellinus, and he's talking about just a lot shorter. He says, just as the exalted prophetic poet of Mantua, that's Virgil, that's Publius Vergilius Maro, who was the greatest poet in the ancient world, in the Roman world, apart from perhaps Ovid, which is Publius Ovidius Naso. He said, I set a greater work in motion, and for me, the greater order of things is born. That's from Virgil's Aeneid, book 7, lines 44 to 45. I suppose it's now the right time to show the extent and situation of the Gauls. With things having been prepared and between the various passionate occasions of battles unfolding in the unknown, I should not seem to imitate lazy sailors with their sails torn together with certain bits of rigging. What have been valued is to patch them up more securely and be prepared between the swells and the storms that have gathered. From the first origin of the Gauls, the wavering ancient authors left the familiarity of their business at hand half complete. But then a historian, Timagenes, the Greek, with very careful use of language, drew these facts together out of very many books which were ignored and had been for a very long time. Having followed the credence of whom, Timagenes, we will teach the same subject matter distinctly and openly, with the obscurity removed from it. Certain things are sure. The first Aboriginal inhabitants in these regions were called the Celts, that's Keltoi in ancient Greek, which comes from the name of a beloved king, and the Galatai were named from his mother, so the Greek way of speaking called the Gauls, oi Keltoi. Others, the seafaring Dorians, had subsequently inhabited the places bordering there, and before that, Hercules. The Drysidae, the Druids, memorized what had been the true subject matter. Indeed, the bards, which also translates as prophet, sung the courageous deeds of illustrious men and composed the heroic verses about them, the wates, often singing accompanied by sweet melodies of the lyre. In truth, the wates, tried to explore the sublime laws of nature through through introspection, and to unfold them. So they're going into the body, into the soul, meditation. The Drysidae, the Druids, are higher up in their natural abilities and are bound by sacred oaths to fraternities and secret societies. They are raised by questions of profound occult matters and oversee people. They proclaim that the soul is immortal, as the authority of Pythagoras decreed.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's my translation, by the way.
Yeah, I just love being immersed in this world, in the imagination, just trying to paint a picture to try and grasp. And at the same time, there's sadness there, because when you think about, so much that has been lost. One thing, actually, I'm going to bring in a dream of mine. I was presented with a druid in my dream, and he had a name in 3 sections, and the middle section was Duar. And in my dream, I understood this to be related to the kind of Dieu, the Zeus, the god. Basically, it was presented as God-man. I'm interested to know what you think the etymology of the word druid is, as best as you can.
It's a difficult one. There's a good article on ancient origins about this, which explores the Proto-Celtic roots of the word. But in ancient Greek, it means like kind of tree or oak. Drysidae, if you look at it in ancient Greek, it's very connected to nature and the trees. But I understand that there are deeper other origins. I'm not a specialist in Old Irish, so I don't really study that, but I'm dimly aware that there are other Celtic scholars. When I say Celtic, I mean today Celtic scholars that have other, there's this whole other side of Druidic studies, which is the people from Ireland, the people from Wales, people from Scotland, people from Cornwall, even people from like Brittany and places like that, even northern Spain. There are still, there's another side to this. So I don't really have that much authority, but as far as I'm concerned, I looked it up, and it comes down to tree worship, or a lover of trees, of nature. That's what Dry Sedai means, or druid. It means like kind of dryad, druid.
I'm wondering if there's a connection between the tree as the body of God in the same way as the Kabbalistic tree, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
You know
yes,
what I
there
mean?
is. Yes,
Yeah.
well, there's Yggdrasil, which is a Scandinavian. It comes from Snorreston's prose Edda, and it's also mentioned in the Poetic Edda. And there's even a very nice, beautiful piece of comparative religion. And this is a neo-pagan book, and I'm heavily into neo-paganism. I'm actually giving a lecture at a neo-pagan festival next year as a result of my Mystic Pool podcast. But anyway, it's very, very interesting, because the word cross in Latin, crux, actually means tree. And if you look at Odin in the Eddas, he was hung on a tree, just like the tarot cards, where he received his magical training and he died, and he came back to life 3 days later, just like Christ, just like right now, the spring equinox, Easter. It's the same thing. They're talking about the same thing. One is neo-pagan, one's Christian.
I just want to come in here now, right? Druids, yeah, the oak. Odin, hung from a tree. Christ, crucified on wood. Buddha sits under the Bodhi tree.
Yeah.
Come on, it's telling us that the way to access universal consciousness is through the motif of a tree.
Well, I actually wrote out the tree here. It's a very bad, you can't really see it there, but that is a rough sketch of the tree, and it overlays the Sephiroth, or the Sephira, in the Kabbalah, which is like and it's almost exactly the same. It's not the same. It has slight discrepancies, but it seems eerily the same, that they're different worlds: Midgard, Asgard, Hell, Svartheim, Messelstein, Tortenheim, Niflheim, Vanaheim, Losjothheim. They almost are like Malkuth, going right the way up through all of the. So when we talk about path working, which is something that Victoria talks about, whom I respect a great deal, and although we've had a bit of a bumpy road recently, she's taught me a lot about path working, actually, and that the only way is to work up the path, because there is a way to which other they're not really Bardonists, those people, in my opinion. There are some that study the left hand path, but I tend to work my way up the tree when I meditate. I don't, and it's the tree is very, very important, specifically for the Shemham Foresh, for the Mercurial angels.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and we are all friends. There's going to be some bumps over the years, but we're all good people, and so we do learn from each other. And I'm just going through the notes here. By the way, is there anything else you want to bring in? Oh no.
Oh, well, you mentioned sadness about the annexation of Britain, and I wondered if I might just be able to. I don't want to waffle on about this too much, but it makes me.
You're allowed to waffle.
It makes me sad when I think about this, and I deeply think about it. And although I'd like to have focused more on the magical aspects of my play, and there is actually a spell in the play, and I probably shouldn't say this, but when I finished writing the spell, and it invoked the winds, and it's drawn from the modern Bardon Hermetic writings of Nanad Georgievic Talaman, MA, and I combined it with the works of Hesiod, Theogony, and the works of Homer. and I put them all together in a short sentence, and it invoked the winds, and it was quiet as you like. And suddenly this huge gust of wind came in the night, and all of the trash cans on the street got smashed about, and there was this massive clutter of noise. And that's actually in the play, by the way. But so I'd like to focus on the magical aspect, but there's the sadness that you mentioned, and that is how I end the play, my play Boudica, Queen of the Iceni. And I'd just like to read a short part of it. And it's written in the iambic pentameter, and it's the final battle when this is the last part of the play. It's Act 5, Scene 4, and it's somewhere in Buckinghamshire in the battlefield. And Boudica says, "So sad a sight was never before seen, as 80,000 of our countrymen hewn down by the savagery of Rome. Many were hurled to the house of Hades, Britain's brave souls, heroes eternally. I would sooner die than be taken by the heartless sons of Romulus and Mars. How cruel fortune attacks me from all sides. We're driven by the fates. Let's yield to them. Only death frees the upright from fortune. Therefore, I endure my allotted fate as best I can, and I know full well that necessity's force brooks no resistance. Hand me that same hemlock Socrates drank, or pass Cleopatra's poisoned chalice. My soul's headed for the Isle of the Blessed, Avalon, to be with Prasutagus. Though Britain was not saved, I did my best. No one can ask for more than that. Live on, Albion, for whom I gave all. A time will come when we'll outlive Rome's rule, when Britain shall stand proud in all the world. I am not yet discharged of my duty. I owe this island, our mother country. Go, tell my daughters, if they live once more, and all that escape those cruel Roman swords, that they retain their weapons and resist. Let Rome know that Britons don't submit."
Amen.
But yeah,
And
that's the
there's
end.
a lot of complexity here in our conversation. So you might have. Where did that come from?
That came from a variety of sources, but mainly me. But it's inspired by the writings of Plato. So when it talks about Atropos, cutting the thread of life and necessity, that's actually the end of Plato's Republic, when he talks about a mystical land that is beyond this one, and that the three fates, one of which weaves, one of which cuts, and another one which guides the thread through the spindle of life. And it's a mystical experience of going into another world. It's also found in the writings of Plutarch, but most of it's me, and the figure is taken from Cassius Dio, who's one of our main sources, the other being Tacitus.
Yeah, I mean, even though I'm not a royalist myself, I do love my country. Don't get me wrong.
It's dedicated to Her Majesty.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, like, you're touching me in that place, you know, right? It's like there's a parallel between, you know, the legend of Boudica, this really mysterious figure. Some people think she didn't exist, and you know, other people, you know, she's a very, you know, a very strong figure, especially with the red hair. It's all written by the Romans and everything. You can't be exactly sure, but there's a parallel between her and Queen Elizabeth I, that red-headed woman with the, you know, the breastplate leading the, you know, the
Yes,
obviously
but
the
this was written just before Her Majesty died. As soon as the pen finished the last line, Her Majesty died. It chokes me up saying about this, but just after she died, I was asleep on that bed there. I had a dream, and she came to me in the dream, and she said, "Publish that play." She said, "Publish that play," and I haven't done it because I have problems with getting HTML and CSS3, which I have to figure out if I want to publish it, and I haven't found a proper publisher. But she came to me, and yeah.
I believe you. I believe you because we all have these kinds of experiences in life, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to get you on as well, because I do intuitively sense a jewel here. So I want you to be exposed to potential publishers, because this whole HTML is sort of, you talk about it, it kind of goes over my head a little bit. I do think that there's someone out there who will find a lot of value in this. So can you give us an outline of your play?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's it's got two themes. Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, I wasn't going to touch it because it's been done to death, right? And so I wrote another play. I like plays with strong women, women like Victoria. I like plays about strong women. I mean, Victoria Amadea, yeah?
Yep.
That's what I like. So there are two themes to this play. One is resistance to a huge military machine that's many times larger than this tiny island with the heart of a lion that stands up to these people and says, no, I'm not going to do it. And she burnt down London and Colchester, and the only archaeological evidence that survives is a layer of ash that's dated to the exact same time. Oh, and there's a few coins of Prasutagus which exist, so we know she existed, but the archaeological evidence is tenuous. So anyway, that's one theme. The other theme is magic. So throughout the book, you find spells from the ancient world that are woven into it. One of it's from Macrobius's Saturnalia, where the Romans engaged in spiritual warfare. But I turned it around. I gave it to the Britons because of the writings of Pliny the Elder that said that everybody practiced magic in Britain back in the ancient times. It's found in the TV show Britannia by Sky. That's a fictitious work. It's nothing like this. That's prosaic. But the two themes are, it's a pseudo historical account of a very, I mean, I'm a Gemini, right? So I have a lot of cold feelings and a dark side to me, which I try not to indulge in. That my twin brother is he's like my evil twin, yeah, and he's a really dark character. Yeah, I tend to try to have a positive mental attitude, and also a patriot, a vehement patriot, right? But at the same time, people have been saying, like the academic community in Cambridge before I graduated with my first degree, they said, oh, we're going to give you a good job. I went to Cambridge, no good job. Tanya Robinson found me. She gave me the first good job I had, but I found something even better than the job. I found a love of Franz Bardon. It was like I'd always been reading the Hermetic text, but I was really grasping at straws. I could go out of body, sure, but I didn't really know what was going on until I met Tanya. Anyway, so where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so I've got a lot of bitterness in me because I was working at Domino's before I studied my first degree. I got my master's, and I'm still deemed as no one that's worth anything. I'm a slave. I'm either a beggar doing my busking or I'm a slave in a factory, and that holds as true today as it ever did. So I'm fucking pissed off about this. So what I did was, instead of giving into that energy, I channeled it into the voice of the Roman speakers. So they are really harsh on the Britons when they want to be. But because I'm a patriot, it's always the Britons that get the last laugh. So I can give you some examples of that in the play. I'll give you the. I was nearly finished. I've nearly finished. Can I read the end of the play?
Yeah, I was just about to say to you, like, let's hear some of this play.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go back to the most beautiful bit about our country. How about that? Which this is inspired by homelessness and a love for Britain. So how about that? This has only got comparatively few sources. There's a Hermetic novel called the manuscript found at Saragossa by Jan Potocki. It's got a bit of Milton in there. Not his Paradise Lost, funny enough. It was another poem he wrote about a friend who died in a shipwreck off of Wales. But anyway, you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so this is the narrator. The narrator comes on in mythological garb. So it's like an ancient deity, or a dryad, or a hamadryad, or a nereid, or a gnome, or it could be a nymph, or a sylph, or a satyr. And it says, across Oceanus, who encircles the globe, beyond his boundless swirling sea, is home. Home in golden valleys dappled with trees. Home to folk hewn of old Albion's oak, to the good people of the Iceni. In the spring, the near still waters of the Nene meander serpentine as a mirror, reflecting those shades of fecund green which line its banks, its waters half shimmer, sparkle like newly minted coins scattered here and there, as elegant blue damsels flit from leaf to flower, red admirals flutter in couples spiraling like torques, dryads' leafy limbs arch to heaven's vault, and wild naiads play in the river, as two young lovers embracing for sport. Such was their love, in awe of each other, for he that Jove himself was not brighter, nor are Apollo's rays more resplendent. She, fairer than Venus, truly even than Aurora, whose shafts illuminate young men, whose rose as daughter of the sun and moon, that gave birth to the five winds, who weeps so much for King Memnon, that dawn bedecks morning grasses with tears of dew. Once loved by stars that shine like glistening gems, that are so many, yet in truth so few. She that is joined between earth and heaven, her warmth gives hope to weary wanderers, as has golden flowers facing her way. She, that delicate light brings renewal. All men welcome her morning darts each day. Here are the rays of gentlest morning, that melt man's cynical or modest ways, warmer than that flinty, ice-cold feeling, which is of no service to kind men's hearts. The charms of fair nature cannot fail to leave a soft impression, as does art. Their homestead on the banks of the great Ouse, nestled in gently sloping flanks of hills, is one of the most enchanting places in all the regions of the vast, wide world. Here lie friendships, feelings of tender trust, love, and a deep courtesy shown by all, which make each passing day a true delight. What we in this brief life call happiness fills every moment beneath the sun's rays on a warm spring day or throughout the dark night. Here the gods crafted a second Eden, a place as though the sun shines on both sides. Here lies the blessed heart of Albion. Here is where Queen Boudica resides.
Beautiful. And like I just said, someone out there, get this guy published, get this.
No, I'm going to publish it myself. HTML just means hypertext markup language.
I'm going to go into Bill Broughton mode here. Shut the fuck up,
Okay.
mate. Someone out there with some clout, just get in contact with this guy and just get this published. I'm not being, I hope I'm not coming across sycophantic. I want to see that happen. I want to see this guy back on this channel with that published. And there is, perhaps we should, I'll tell you what, we'll take a little break here and back in just a couple of seconds. Okay, welcome back to the last section. And we were thinking, how do we wrap this up? Obviously, this series of interviews is called Hermetics Explored. So Max was just telling me about an Hermetic prayer that he translated for Martin Fawkes. So we'll get him to read it as well. So if you want to tell us, I should say as well, this is useful. This is interesting. This is also practical. It's instructive. So take it away, Max.
Okay, so this is section 131 of the Corpus Hermeticum, and it's actually unusual because although it is not only the most important part of all of the Hermetic texts, that includes the philosophical Hermetica, the technical Hermetica, if you even make that distinction. Some people don't, like such as Wouter J. Hanegraaff. He says they're all just Hermetic texts, but it's actually written in verse. So when you're translating it, everything else is just line by line, and then you come to this one bit and it's a song. So it's actually, when you get it in English, you're not really, it's like a poem or a piece of music. And even in the preamble at section 130, it talks about a kind of song to do with the soul's energy. And anyway, I did translate it in my first translation, which is from Ficino's Corpus Hermeticum, which is a Latin text. But because it's such a crucial part of the Corpus Hermeticum, I thought it was worth revisiting and making a close examination of the Greek. So I'd just like to say the prayer, and then afterwards just revisit parts of it just to show how it can be interpreted in different ways. And this is just one interpretation because it's very complicated. It's deep. Okay, so here we go.
Okay.
So this is the prayer. Holy God and Father of the entire universe, Holy God, the will of the gods shall not be accomplished without your personal powers. Holy God, who wishes to be known and who perceives the personal powers. You are holy, uniting reality with the Logos. You are holy. All nature is surely not born to be like you. You are holy. Nature is surely not the endued form. You are holy, stronger and of all power. You are holy, greater and of all preeminence. You are holy, stronger and worthy of praise. Amen. So that's the prayer. And then you get things in it like, say, there's in the first line you say universe. Well, the word in ancient Greek is, well, the phrase is agios or theos kai panter ton onon. So onon could mean like kind of an unqualified adjective meaning the whole, the one, the entire. But it could also be a substantive meaning the universe. And it's also in the plural, suggesting that there is more than one universe. And then you have another line, like say the second line, it talks about the personal powers. This is ebule, which also means the design. So it's like the universe is not just random atoms colliding together, like in the works of Titus Lucretius, where he's an Epicurean philosopher, which also makes an appearance in the Corpus Hermeticum. But it's saying that this is a designed universe, that there is a pattern that you can't see, that this is all preordained, that this is creation. And you don't get this in English. This is only when you study the Greek, right? Okay, so the next line it comes up with here, and it talks about a perception, right? And this it could also mean how you come to know, or how you distinguish or discern something. When it talks about the personal powers, it can also mean a distinctness, a separate, a set apart, something strange, unusual, peculiar, exceptional, proper, specific, appropriate, characteristic, one's own. You know, these are all different meanings of the same word, and it's all beneath the surface. And then it goes on and it talks about uniting reality. And these can mean things like all the combining, the associating, the putting together, the organizing, the framing, making solid, banding together, something that is allied, something that is proven. And it has a myriad other meanings as well. The next word means things which actually exist, the present as opposed to the past or the future. It also means truth. It can mean property, can mean good fortune. Then we have logos, which is the word of God. In the Corpus Hermeticum, Pyamandres produced a doing word at 1.4, another very important line. There are other connections here to writings of religious epiphany found in the Book of Enoch, Hildegard von Bingen, Julian of Norwich. We find in Porphyry's Lysipratinus, the Oxyrhynchus Papyrus. We find Hermes Trismegistus saying, I perceive the word through Pyamandres, who had spoken to me himself, leaving me astonished and awestruck. And it goes on. So what I'm trying to say is that the meditation and pondering on these things, pondering on sacred symbols, is one aspect, the sigils for the summoning and conjuring of spirits. But just as worthy is the study of ancient language. And it is a kind of inverted snobbery for people to look up to people who have studied, and it's taken me 13 years to learn Latin, and I'm only really just getting good at translating it in the last 2 or so. But it just don't be dismissive of scholars. Scholars are every bit as worthy as practitioners. Practitioners will always have access to deeper knowledge than scholars will, but scholars have an awful lot of knowledge, even if practitioners have more wisdom. Luckily, I'm both. So
That's beautiful. I'm wondering, actually, do you have, because I actually have it in one of my diaries, your translation of the Emerald Tablet. Do you have that handy?
yeah, I do, and that was a very early attempt, and it's actually Isaac Newton's
Yeah.
uh, uh, translation. And weirdly, it there's a guy called John Maynard Keynes who was a very influential economist, and he called Isaac Newton the last magician. He called him the last alchemist. So he wasn't thinking of Newton as like a kind of scientist and a great, because he spent years studying sacred symbols and trying to fathom their meaning. But I do have it, and if I could translate it now today, then I probably would translate it differently. Oh no, actually, I didn't. No, I translated Newton's. This is another one I translated from Chrysogonus Polydorus. Probably the best version of the Emerald Tablet is translated from the Arabic, the classical Arabic, and that is found on one of Martin's videos. And there's a beautiful book which is beautifully illustrated with a lovely translating, because that's a lot truer. But this is my vain attempt. So I'm
Okay.
gonna.
I want to say, what we'll do is we'll say goodbye now, and
Okay.
then you read the Emerald Tablet, and then we'll just switch off in silence and let that sink in. So
Okay.
I'm going to say, Maxwell Lewis Latham,
Latham.
you are Latham, you are a gem in the scene. It's been absolutely fascinating, and if you could just give us the Emerald Tablet as a way of concluding an awesome interview. Thank you.
Broderick, it's been an honor, and believe me, it's so great to talk to you as well. I've learned a lot today, not just about wisdom and practice, but also about myself. So humility, and I'll just leave this for the practitioners. This is the truth. There's no lie. It is certain, and it is the truest truth. As above, so below. One thing is a miracle which must be accomplished. All things had come from one source, by meditation. One is born from one thing which is adapted. His father is the sun, his mother the moon. The wind bore the child in her womb, and his foster mother is the earth herself. All father, complete the task all the more for the world. This is it. His virtue is intact, if he should have moved within a certain sphere upon the earth. You will separate the earth element from fire, and the finely woven fabric from thick, pleasantly, and with great natural ability. And for that reason, all the darkness will flee away from you. It is this thing which is stronger. It is with strength. It is of strength, because it will conquer every finely woven thing there is, every solid thing, and will penetrate the darkness with its light. And so a new world is created. From here, they will fulfill extraordinary miracles, of whose mystery is this measure of things. And so I am he. I am Hermes, the thrice greatest. I have been summoned on earth and have the three branches of philosophy, which are all the more for the world. It is complete, what I had said from the very beginning, as I was engaged in the worship of the sun god.
It is complete.
For those wishing to begin or perhaps refresh Hermetic training, please see the link in the description box for Seshen Circle, Blue Bell Hill. Thank you so much. So, What did we learn this time? We're all weird. We're all friends. We're all valuable to each other. And most importantly of all, perhaps, if you're going through serious shit, it probably means the gods find you very, very interesting. Take care out there in the dark.